All right, so this video is actually probably going on YouTube. So what's up, YouTube? It's your boy. It's your boy. I don't even talk like that. So my son talks like that. It's your boy, but it's your boy, Louis Shaddai, aka Dale Taylor. Or whatever way you want to do that. And Dale Taylor is my government name. Obviously, Lord Shaddai is how a lot of people know me online and through different channels and things like that. So either way, really wanted to start a YouTube channel specifically dedicated to just having conversations around things. I don't really want a channel dedicated to debate. This isn't like some kind of entertainment channel. I don't want to sit here and argue back and forth with people on the internet about specific items or subtasks or things. I just want to talk existentially about moreover large topics, things that are global, sometimes things that are local to me, but they're not necessarily going to be simple topics or things that are going to be debatable in a trash can or anything like that. We're not going to come away with this great resolution in every single way, but nonetheless, I feel like these are some things that I want to talk about. Sometimes they're going to be conversations, sometimes I'm just going to be ranting, and hopefully sometimes I will get some people to ask for specific topics they want to talk about, and we can have those discussions, and I'll give you my thoughts. And I generally try to be well prepared before I come. I'm not a person who does a lot of extra research. I'm not trying to make this a formal research channel. This isn't a composition channel or something like that where I'm going to go through and create like published articles or anything like that. This is just seriously just a conversational channel. So with that in view, one of the reasons I created this channel was because I spend a lot of time talking to my wife and my son and my sister, and a lot of times talking to myself about topics and subjects that are just they're on my mind. But I'm not a big social media person. I don't really like posting snippets, because I feel like that's an impossibility to learn somebody from those snippets. I can't post a photo of me and say, "Ooh, great pizza," and you just think, "Oh, well, Dale loves pizza," or "Lord Shaddai loves pizza." Either way, I don't think that it's appropriate to kind of slice my life up into little bits like that and try to present them and create any kind of cohesive story, because that's just not who we are, and that's not how simple humans are. But with that being said, I'll address that topic some other day. I don't want to get too far off topic yet today. Today I want to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and one that actually is really near and dear right now. Kind of a topic of bit of distress and a bit of duress for the rest of the U.S., and something that we don't like to have discussions around, and that is Black culture. Specifically Black American culture, but I'm going to just say Black American culture, African American culture, Black culture. I'm going to use those interchangeably, even though they are not. And I want to make sure that people understand they are not interchangeable. I'm not using them interchangeably as a status of I don't understand the differences. I'm using them just conversationally. So some Black people consider themselves just American. They don't consider themselves African American. Some Black people consider themselves Black and not necessarily Black American. So it just kind of all depends on how people determine what they want to call themselves for their individual scope and their individual lens. So I am not going to be using a lens of choice here. I'm just going to be talking about individual African American, Black American. So when I talk about Black culture, specifically, I watched a video the other day on YouTube that was really, really intriguing. It was a really good video by a guy named Bo. I don't know. It was a gentleman who's Caucasian, redhead, nice beard, Irish gentleman. You'll know if you watch this video. Again, look it up. It's like a couple years old. Like white man explains how you can never understand how it feels to be a Black person. And a lot of people think that this is like their lack of intelligence or lack of their ability to understand what it's like to be a Black person, and it's not. It's just a matter of I cannot live your journey and you cannot live my journey. When we step out of the house, we are different people, and the world perceives us differently. They perceive us based upon a lot of different things. Humans are very good with their eyes at determining danger and value and things like that. So when they look at me, they're not going to look at what they look at, like my wife, or they look at like my mom or my brother or whoever. They're going to look at each of us individually. We're all going to have our own judgment, and that's fine. But that of itself is what one of the pressures that have shaped culture. Culture is always shaped by pressure. It's not shaped by it's not shaped. I believe human culture is always going to be shaped. It's not shaped always just organically, naturally. You just come together and you go, oh, we want to pick up leaves. Those leaves had some purpose in the culture, and then in some way were infused into rituals, or they're added into recipes, and they've been used for hundreds of years, thousands of years in some cases. Culture is one of those things that is created under pressure. Black culture in America is specifically, in my opinion, it's one of those things where we have lost it completely, of course, because it was taken from us. And I'm not going to dwell upon some of the seedier details of slavery and the loss of Black culture, but I may get into that in another video. But I think that it's something that we avoid talking about, specifically because it's painful. It's not something that most of us enjoy. It's not a topic that I think many of us even want to have conversations around. I've had white friends my entire life. We don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about Black American culture. We talk about just regular everyday stuff. We talk about our adventures together. We've known each other 20 plus years, etc. So we talk about lots of good things, but we rarely spend the time talking about Black culture or any serious topics, just because they're so Debbie Downer. I mean, who wants to sit down and have a serious conversation around something? And I'm not mean Debbie Downer isn't we should, but who wants to, when you're at your friend's house, have a conversation that's going to bring things into perspective? It's going to bring things into the fold. A lot of people don't want that. So you just don't have those conversations. So Black culture was decimated through slavery, as we know. We lost not only where we came from, as you think about it, every slave came from a different region, tribe. Some were prisoners of war, some were just captured by other tribes, some were just let down. There were many sources for how Western African trade. We can go into how that happened in some other thing, but the crux of it is that when these people left, they were not a monolithic people. They were many people with many cultures, oftentimes enemies, sometimes friends, but not all of the same background, even in any shape or way or form. And they were taken, and they were basically kind of, to use a metallurgy term, or forge welded together. They were basically forced to combine their cultures together by hook or by crook. They were just basically jammed into boats, sent over here, and they were forced to determine how they were going to live the rest of their lives. Through mistreatment, through being fed slop, being beaten, the physical toll shaped our culture. Not going to get into a lot of the physical deaths and the tortures and stuff. That those things are all true. They still exist, and those are things that we definitely need to address and have conversations with. But we can start with just talking about the decimation of our culture. Having no culture means that you have nothing to imprint your children with. You have nothing to imprint upon the next generation. So when 1865 hit and we were allowed finally to be free, if you will, we use free. During that period, we were nobodies. And I mean that from the standpoint, we were the nobodies, the people without a home, the people without a culture, the people without history. Our history was livestock for the last hundreds of years. So Africans didn't consider us truly African. Americans didn't consider us truly American. American Indians had slaves. People don't even talk about that. The fact that American Indians had slaves and also treated slaves, African Americans, Black slaves, the same way white people treated slaves. And yet, and still, hundreds of years later, people do see American Indians as bigger victims than Americans. And, that's all debatable. Than Black Americans, sorry. And that's debatable. I would say we can have that conversation another day. But I will say that when it all ended, we were the nobodies. We had no history, we had no culture, we have nowhere to go. And so where do you go from there? There's no handbook for that. I don't think in the history of the world, there's not that many stories of broken cultures. I mean, the Kurds are one culture that you can think of where they are the largest minority on earth without a country, if you will, a home country. But they still have their culture. They have thousands of years of culture. They have history. They have the toys that they played with. They have all the things that they used to do. They got a lot going on. So it's not like they're without. Now, Kurdish, so we can talk about Kurdish politics later. But at least they have that. We have nothing. So when we talk about post-matrix, post-slavery, we're talking about what I call the matrix. And that is when, okay, now we're in this system. we're free in this system, right? Okay, now there's this capitalist system. We have to make money. We have to build businesses. We have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, whatever you want to call it. We're going to take that time. We're going to do that. Where do you start? Nobody was allowing us to do it. And now at the same time, even if you were allowed to do that, like peacefully, even if somebody just left you alone and said, go build your culture, in hundreds of years, figure out who you are, you wouldn't. It would just take it. It's impossible. You have to, the calling of life. If we talk about the Maslow's hierarchies of needs, you can look that up on another channel, or maybe link that, or not another channel, on the web. I can link something to the Maslow's hierarchies of needs. But once you take away your physical responsibilities first, then you get into your mental capacity, into your spirituality, higher levels, and things like that. When you're starting at just nothing from a culture standpoint, that's up the pyramid quite a ways. You have to get to the spirituality and the mental aspect, but we had the physical aspect to take care of. We didn't have any food, water, homes, etc. So again, you had to go back into indentured slavery, if you will, or however you want to go into it. And we're going to spend a lot of buku time on this because I don't want to, it's not the lack of culture that I have to explain. I think everybody understands that Black Americans, not everybody understands, but anybody who takes a second to think about it and says, okay, let me think about, I'm British and this is what this means, and I'm French and this is what this means, and I'm Armenian and this is what this means, and I'm Chinese and I'm Japanese and I'm Korean, and all of those things, those words come with a history. They come with a culture. They come with shields and swords and fantasies and things like that. There's an attachment of stories and a whole entire genre to learn about their histories and everything that's going on. Black Americans do not have that and have not had that. So we need to recognize that is not something that exists for us. We don't have any pride in our country outside of the fact that we do have pride in our nation. I am a veteran. I'm a U.S. veteran. Just so anybody out there who thinks that we're not vets or whatever, I'm a veteran, a U.S. veteran. I'm very proud of my country. I love America, but not all Black Americans feel like that way, and they should not have to feel that way. Honestly, America is not a fair country for us, and it is a place where we're trying to learn to live. And I think it's very difficult because we are probably the youngest culture being formed in the world. I feel like at times we're this small volcano that is under constant pressure from the world, through the police, through political action, through just the societal pressures, through the way people view us, the way our art comes out, and the way the art produces just response in people about how they really how they love Black culture. And that's Black American culture, and that's us kind of developing it. The rap, the hip hop, the things like that. We have developed a good 50, 60, 70, 100 plus years of culture, and more than that. We'll talk into that later, but that people know of on service value. We've developed this great culture that people know on at face value. But it's not complete, and it's not something that is taught universally. We don't have a full story, a cohesive story. So we just have this lack of. So let's talk about, talk a little bit about cultural identity. One of the things I do want to talk about is that Black people need to understand that a lot of times we're told to educate ourselves, or we're told educate our neighbor, or tell a neighbor to educate themselves. And this is a very difficult thing to do. Educating yourself about something that you're ignorant to is almost an impossibility, just because you don't even know where to begin educating yourself. Like, you have to give some kind of way or some kind of beginning starting point. So to kind of give you a starting point for me and how I got into this specific topic, about 6 months ago, probably at this point, I was struggling with this. Struggling with just trying to understand what is our cultural identity, and what do I feel when I think about being Black in America. And I was trying to understand how I felt about that. And one of the things that really caught my eye a while ago actually was Rastafari. One of the things that caught my eye about Rastafari is that I was very, very interested in specifically more about it from a standpoint of I just didn't understand the people, and two, I had seen Snoop Dogg's Snoop Lion special, and I was thinking, really cool. I didn't really pay attention to a lot of the deeper aspects of what was going on, when he was hanging out with Bunny Wailer and a few other things. But one of the things that I did pay attention to was the health aspect of eating properly and understanding what eating right and things like that. And that really kind of intrigued me. I said, wait, there's more to these Rastafari people than I initially thought. I really just thought, reggae, smoke weed, and hang out. That's it. But as I did my research and started to dig in and understand, there's a lot to them. And one of the things I want to say about Rastafari is, one, I do consider myself Rastafari. I am a Rastafari. I also want to make sure that I say that, but two, I'm not going to bias anyone towards Rastafari purposely, but I do want to talk about it as this from the standpoint of from an educational standpoint, from a opinion-based standpoint around Black culture. So the Rastafari, I'm not going to tell their complete history, but I'm going to do a very, very quick summation. The Rastafari are primarily situated in Jamaica, but all throughout the world, globally, a global initiative. Think of it more of a spirituality movement than a religion, but very, very religious, tied into Christianity, really kind of Abrahamic. But the real thing I want to talk about is the fact that Rastafari were escaped slaves. And a lot of people don't know that. The British had colonized Jamaica, and the British did not get along. And the slaves in Jamaica and the British colonials didn't get along, and there was lots of fighting, years and years of war. And at the end of it, a lot of escaped slaves had escaped deep into the mountains and had learned, had educated themselves around slavery, had really, really started to, become rebel. They were rebels, and I don't want to glorify, because I know there's going to be people out there who say, well, I lost my uncle in the British colonial war with the Jamaicans. I don't want to have that kind of conversation. Death and conflict and things like that are always going to be inevitable, and they're tragic, and I don't want to kind of diminish that, but I do want to say that when they got out to the mountains, they educated themselves on what the colonials had done to them, how colonialism worked, how they were profiting, and they really kind of thought about this. They really took some time and said, you know what, we need to be able to express ourselves and understand and understand who we are, and also save some of our stories, etc. So they fought off, and they basically earned their independence after like 80 or 90 years plus, something like that. And I know people will correct me on that, and I'm not being a historian, but I will say that once they had done that, once they'd corrected once they've collected themselves in those mountains, which is funny, you can look up some of the Blue Mountains, but on the boonies, I believe, or they used to call them the Maroons. Yeah, the Maroons. So once you look up the Maroons, you'll see like kind of the history behind that. But once these people were marooned way out there, they learned a lot about their culture, and they tried to save what they could. A lot of people don't know, but escaped slaves from America also migrated to the Rastafari, and lots of other things happened. The Rastafari specifically are named Rastafari because of a man who died as Emperor Haile Selassie. Originally, and there's no notes or anything here, I'm just kind of, I don't know why I keep looking off to my right, but originally Haile Selassie was born as Rastafari. Ras means king in Ethiopian. And Tafari was his name. His father was also Ras. He became an emperor from king. He became king of kings because of the way the Ethiopian empire was laid out. It was different kingdoms all over the place with a lot of different kings. He was born the king of one of the kingdoms, and became the ruler of all the kingdoms. But prior to that, in late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a man known as Marcus Garvey, and another man known as Reverend Bell, and a few other very, very inspirational Black leaders that you should look up and you should know who they are. Just specifically out of curiosity, just if you have any interest in Black American culture or the culture as a whole. I think one of the things Black Americans need to do is we need to spread our spectrum out and realize that we need to focus less on Black American culture and more on the culture of all the Blacks who were taken along the slave trade path, because the boats that went to Jamaica were just the same type of boats that took a right up to Virginia. They're the same people stolen from the same places, doing the same labor in different location. It's basically just an extension of the United States, not from the geographical standpoint, but from the standpoint of a slave. I mean, it's just a boat ride over. You're doing the same work. It's not like you've changed. So we are the same people historically. And so I found that a lot of the elders, the elder rises and some of the people up in the mountains in Jamaica have a lot of these stories. And a lot of the people have a lot of older slave stories and things about our culture that we don't know. And that was absolutely intriguing to me, to think that there are elder African Americans and elder um, post slaves who have this understanding and who have gone through these 80 and 90 years of revolution, and then they have like this entire recorded history of song and things you can learn about them, from the thingy drums to emperor. Yeah, it's lots of things you can learn about Rastafari. One of the most important things I think that Rastafari really bringing about a clean diet, understanding how to make peace with the world around you, and understanding how to be proud of who you are, no matter who you are. And Black Americans really need to learn this. I think Black American pride is one of the things that has been wounded very, very, very difficultly. I know for me personally, one of the things that bothers me the most about slavery, I think, is the fact that when I think back to when I think that I could have been in that situation if I was born just a couple of generations ago, it just is really frustrating, because I know that I don't think that I would have done well in that situation, and I think most people wouldn't. But it enrages me that I could have been, and so it makes me feel so angry that people could have done to my predecessors, to people, to human beings that I know. But it also leaves a void, and okay, that's fine, but now where do I go? Like, who am I going forward? All right, fine. I'm angry about what happened. I'm upset about it. I'm demoralized about what happened to my people. But how do I pick myself up as a culture, as a man, as an African American, as a Black American, as an African, as however you want to explain yourself or describe yourself, or whatever words you want to use? How can I pick myself up and understand what is going on in the world? I think that Rastafari has helped me to understand that peace is the way to go. It's the way to just understand that the world around you is going to react to you in a way that is unique to you. How you react is all that you can control. And that is how I live daily. That's how I've lived daily for a long time. It works 95% of the time, but there are times when somebody just pushes the wrong button, or things just aren't going well. And it's just not, it's just not sometimes you just lose it. Being Black in America is not easy, very difficult. But the Rastafarian culture has allowed me to understand, one, how we should eat. Gong, one of the leaders, the original founders of Rastafari, the Rastafari movement, they don't have leaders, no centralized control. There's no doctrine that you have to prescribe to. It isn't some brainwashing thing where, like, I'm not going to get into too many religions, but some organized religions are, where the followers are threatened with hell if they don't, things like that. This is more, I don't mean the place hell, I mean threatened with hell, like, give them hell. If they go outside of the norms. So I think that Rastafari is not one of those, more in line with Zen Buddhism or other things like that, where we're looking for a center of peace. And I think that they all really kind of have a great solid core. But one of the things that we're going to have to do is, I believe that all Black people, whether you want to not convert, there's no conversion to Rastafari. You say you're Rastafari, you are Rastafari. One of the things about Rastafari I don't like, and I can talk about some things I don't like in a different video, is the worship of Emperor Haile Selassie. There seems to be a very controversial topic amongst Rastafari, and Rastafari being peaceful people are not going to. It's not my job. It's not my job. It's not I job to judge I and I's thoughts. It's my job to understand I and I's thoughts. So it's not my job to say you should not worship Emperor Haile Selassie. He is not, Jesus. He even says he's not Jesus. And nothing. The only thing giving him divine status is the fact that Reverend Bell told Marcus Garvey that a king would rise from the East, a black king out of Africa. And about 20 years later, Rastafari was crowned king. So being the black king out of Africa, the timing was perfect. So there are some people who think that Haile Selassie himself was a deity or was a prophet. My personal opinions on that is I think that Haile Selassie was a great man trying to do a lot of great things. You need to really understand his story and understand what he was going through to understand his shortcomings. A lot of people think of Ethiopia and they see the starvation and they see the dust plains. And I'm not saying he was perfect or anything like that, but I'm saying that if you look at what Mussolini did to Ethiopia and you look at what Haile Selassie was trying to accomplish prior to what Mussolini and Italy moved in, you can see that the man was definitely on the right track, on the right path. He was left with a decimated country post-war, and we can get into a lot of other things that happened to him from political calculations and standpoints. But in the end, humans messed up another human, and that's just the way it is. We tend to influence, shift, and change other humans from their preferred course of life, or from their from what they would like to accomplish. As you say, the best laid plans of mice and men. You know what I mean? And no plans ever survive first contact with the enemy. No, that's the same thing. The first time you decide you want to do something, and you add another person, you'll have to adjust the way you do. So, but I do respect Haile Selassie as a great king. I do respect him, and I have a lot of things to say about that. But this isn't that type of video. This video is Black culture. We're already 20 plus minutes in, so I want to go ahead and get a wrap on this. What we need to do going forward, honestly, is we need to understand first who we are as a culture. We're not a monolith. We have Black people who are more conservative, Black people who are more liberal. I think one of the things we have to be careful of is cultural melding, and that is where I think a lot of white people, to use the colloquial term, white people, I'll just say others, the people who don't understand or don't know, is the cultural melt is the expectation was that we were just going to come out of slavery and just become this, just assimilate. Like, oh, all of a sudden, Jim's just working next to Dave at the CEO table, and they're both, top businessmen, and that's not, that wasn't going to happen. Like, Black people were forced to kind of take whatever paths were available to them. And so basically we only were known for sports and entertainment. Those were the two paths that were really kind of open to us, and the two paths that we took to success, and the two paths that were given to us to success. Anything else was just like, okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to crack that nut. So for instance, if I wanted to get into the corporate boardroom, I know that when I left Kansas City, Missouri, that when I left, there's no way if I come in there with my pants the same way, if I come in there talk, there's no way somebody allows me inside a corporate boardroom. And that's weird, because all that is the preemie, the very, very infantile growth of Black American culture clashing with the monolithic, systemic Black American pie culture. And so that's where I really have a problem with that we need to be careful. I think the cultural melding is where I had a hard part with the grind, with where I was feeling a lot of pressure and tension. It wasn't necessarily just the overt racism, although I have been overtly biased and discriminated against, but it's not that. It comes down to more of the systemic pressure from the cultural melding. Like, you feel like you have to change who you are in order to fit into something else. And you can only keep that pressure up for so long, because you can't live in two worlds. One of the things that one of the terms that I found really, really great was, I think, was a few weeks ago when that Drew Brees incident was happening, after Drew Brees went ahead and the flag and kneeling and all that. And one of his teammates really said something that was just fantastic. And I think it was Malcolm Jenkins. I can't remember. He said, listen, man, you don't know, but like, when we leave that locker room, we go back to, our families and stuff. We don't tell you about that kind of stuff. You just see us, I live in a decent house. I live in a decent neighborhood. But I have to go from, my house to some places people won't even travel to visit people I know, to visit people that I love. And people don't realize that, like, all of us, no matter how rich or how wealthy a black man gets, or no matter how far he goes, has one foot in black America. You don't have a choice. You have to have that foot in black America, which means you always have to keep yourself grounded. Now, I've seen a lot of people who have, this cultural melding thing has gone a little far for them, and that's why I get a little concerned about it, because I think the farther you stretch yourself out of your role, the harder it is to snap back and become a whole person. So I feel like living in the black world, or living in black America, and living in white America, colloquially white America, it's very difficult to balance who you are. It's very difficult to balance your thought processes around, okay, you guys are saying this is great, everybody's eating lunch here every day, but then I know a few blocks away nobody's eating lunch, and there's a bunch of brown people starving. So that is one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I talk about today, because I think cultural melding is one of those things that bother me a little bit, because I feel like we all need to make sure that at the end of the day, we realize that who we are and what we look like is influenced not necessarily by us. We think it's all inside of our head. A lot of it's by what we've seen, what other people have done, by things that are pushed upon us. And so cultural melding is very dangerous in the fact that when you are a nobody, and that's what I'm calling the group of slaves that were freed in 1865, when you're one of the original nobodies, to take a nobody and pretend to be something else is a dangerous thing. Like, you have to be a somebody pretending to be a somebody else. You can't be a nobody pretending to be somebody. You can't have nothing and then try to fit into a role. That's how, we see deep cover and undercover cops losing their minds and getting stopped. Black people, I think, from the cultural melding, not from the standpoint of trying to blend in, going to work every day. My mom used to crack me up. I swear, she would come home and, I used to think of Mr. Rogers when he'd come home and he'd take off that freaking shoes, and he'd take off his jacket, and he'd put his little loose sweater on and all that. I would think about that, and my mom would come home and she would take off her freaking white voice. You know what I mean? She would take off her extra politeness, and she would take it, and it's just absolutely funny to me, because I've always seen it, and I've always felt like this is strange, because when I used to go to white people's houses, they were exactly who they were at home as they were out. They didn't change. So black America in and of itself has features and things about it that people just probably don't know or don't think about. But it does distract me that we have to put these white voices on. And I think that, and I don't mean like we should talk the way you want to, but I mean changing your voice to fit a certain way you want to fit into your job or role or things like that. We have to speak proper English. I get that. I understand. Sometimes we have to, slang cannot be used in everything, but I mean, just like specifically changing your nomenclature, if you or the way you speak. If you're Southern and you got yourself a little drawl, you know what I mean? You should be able to talk with your drawl. Historically, white people are also, I'm going to say this, discriminated against for that. I'm not going to say that discrimination is specifically to black America or black culture. If you have an accent, you generally are going to be discriminated against unless it's an East Coast accent, in which case people say, oh, he must be business-wise. It doesn't mean you're business-wise at all. It just means you grew up in a locale. But that's neither here nor there. So let's talk about how do we reclaim our culture. I think the things that we have to do to reclaim it is, I think every black person, not locally, and I think one of the things that we need to watch out from culture melding is people say, oh, just blend in locally. And I'm just like, oh, do what the locals do. And it's like, if you're a minority group, that's very dangerous, because you're always going to be the minority. It means you're going to be following whatever the majority is doing. So you really need to just be cognizant of what you want to do. Don't think about what is black, what is white, what is this. We are very young from a black culture standpoint in America. We have developed things that we consider black and white, NASCAR being one, other things being, rock and roll being another one. But in reality, if you go back and you do some study, black people have always been interested in every single aspect of America. We have just been ostracized going that direction, and that's not just by white America, that's also by ourselves too. I mean, a black American that wants to go off and become a polo jockey is going to get a little bit of flack. I don't give a crap how good he is. It's just a matter of black people just not going to respect that. You know what I mean? And that is the stuff that we need to self-correct, because the things that we're allowing are the paths that were always allowed to us. And this tree needs more branches. The tree of Black culture has been stunted long enough. We need to go ahead and let it grow. It needs to grow in all the directions that it needs to grow. But I think the point of this video more is to point out what the culture and the status of the culture is to most people, to point out where I see some of the culture things I saw in Rastafari. I saw some of the preservation of 100 years plus of slave culture that you can actually, if you were to go to Jamaica and visit an actual Ras, not on the beach at the sandals, but going out and visit an actual elder from the from my INI community, you would talk to people who understand very, very in depth what's going on in the world around them and who have a lot of great stories. So my suggestion for Black Americans is, when I say is to first accept that your culture is new, accept that you don't have much of it, and that we are all building this thing together, and know that no matter where you go, what you do, Black culture, Black American culture specifically, or African American culture or African culture in the West will continue to prosper and continue to grow. I think we need more people to set these different trails and these different paths. I like Bubba Wallace and the gentleman from Uppity Negro in Netflix. I can't remember his name. Gosh, another great driver. But I play guitar and I do a lot of things that were quote unquote white activities. And I think we kind of get past that. We have to build our Black culture from the ground up. We have to build it from a foundation of understanding. So understand who you are. Study the physical repercussions. Don't hide from them, but don't think of slavery from a statistical basis, or don't try to hide from the fact that it existed at all. Like, oh, well, that was hundreds of years ago. We're not slaves now. It's not a great, healthy mindset. You have to start from the base of understanding who you are and then move forward. That, I mean, I'd like to, I'll leave it up to you guys. You guys let me know what else you want to talk about or cover. I know this was kind of a long video for a first video. We're like 40 minutes or something like that, but it's going to be edited down quite a bit, I'm sure. If you'd like me to talk about anything else, any other topics you'd like me to hear talk about, I would definitely love to discuss many things. So as things come on my mind, I'll be posting. I don't know what my schedule will be so far, but I'll let you know. If you like the video, please give me a like and a subscribe, and I will talk to you guys next time.